I'm Dane Rose, and in this video, we're going to explore the battle of beliefs, or the tension between identities. Now, an identity is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And a belief is part of that identity. And what I want to say is that throughout our life experiences, we have formed beliefs. Now, a belief is a heuristic substitute for a more complex pattern. If we say, for example, my life is great, this is not entirely true. We can look at areas of our life and say, that's not particularly great. We can look at another area and say, that's not particularly great. We could say my house is great, but we can go into some area and we can find some dust or something that's an outlet that's not working, and that's not great. We can also have a belief, for example, that life sucks. And we can look around and we can say, wait a minute, your heart is beating, that doesn't suck. This is not entirely true. And so what we tend to do is, depending on what's going on that we're focusing on and what we're paying attention to, we'll say life sucks or life is great as a symbol for what's going on in our mind. Now, one of the interesting things, is we can look at beliefs as mental architecture, as mental shapes. And so we have one belief like this, and we have another belief like this. And what's interesting about beliefs is that a variety of studies have shown, you'll find this if you ever get into an argument with someone, they're a Democrat, they're a Republican, is you can present evidence that shows that whatever the belief is, the philosophy, etc., is not particularly good. You can, for example, if you're talking to a Christian, point out the fact that a tremendous amount of the murder and death over the last few thousand years have been initiated by Christians. So the teaching may be a good idea, but Christians and Christianity in the way that it's lived out could be a disaster for human life. If you look at the mass murder of some of the islands and their inhabitants on the way to the United States from Europe, and the way gold was, ripped and, taken by missionaries and cutting the hands and feet off of the natives. And you can say Christianity is a terrible thing. But if someone is Christian and believes in Christianity, the more you present evidence that Christianity is terrible, the more certain they will become that they are right and Christianity is wonderful. And the same is true in reverse. If you're having the belief that religion is, the worst thing that could happen to humanity, and you try to take someone to a food shelter that's being run by a church and say, well, it's, it seems to be helping this person, and you share a story of, someone that prayed and felt better and stuff, the more certain you are that you're right, and that all world religions are the bane of mankind, of humankind. And so there's an interesting phenomena that people cling to their beliefs and tend to cling to the beliefs even more when faced with evidence to the contrary. Very few human beings happily change their beliefs and say, oh, I'm so glad you pointed out that, Christians are murderous scoundrels in all kinds of situations. I agree with you, and I'm no longer going to associate with Christianity. And, on the converse, very few people will say, I'm so glad you showed me all the Christians doing this food bank and doing this, and I'm going to become a Christian, right? Now, why? Why is there a battle around these beliefs? And what I'd like to suggest is, going back to identity, is that what people are really clinging to is their definition of themselves, their pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, which includes their core beliefs, that they identify with, which identifying means that you look at that belief and you say, that's me, that's my belief. Now, as soon as you identify with a belief, with a thought, with a habit, if somebody tries to change that habit or change that belief to influence, the way that that's perceived as an ego identity is that you're trying to change me. I am the one who believes that. And so if I change my belief, I become a different person. And what that exposes me to is the unknown. If I am no longer a Christian, or if I am no longer an atheist, or if I'm no longer a Republican or a Democrat, then I don't know who I am. Because I am my pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And so wars are fought as two people clinging to their identity, their pattern, clash. And what they're defending is not data, because there's plenty of data that could support both sides. Whatever the polarity is, there's plenty of data that whether you think life is great, there's plenty of data about how life isn't great. And if you think life is shit, there's plenty of data where life is pretty good. And yet, in order to know who I am, I need these symbols, these dumbed down heuristic representations of a complex pattern that if I just say I am a very complex person who thinks and feels and does and believes all kinds of things, and I can't put it into words and I don't know what it is, then I don't have a strong sense of who I am. And if I don't have a strong sense of who I am, I feel vulnerable to change. And if I'm changing, if one day I believe this and then the next day I believe this other thing and then the next day I'm believing this other thing as I'm exposed to data, if I'm changing, then I'm face to face with the unknown. And within the unknown, see, the unknown is technically neutral, but within the unknown are all of my greatest fears, all of the worst possible things that I could think, that I could feel, that I could experience, that could happen to me. They are all in the unknown. Now, the other thing that's in the unknown is being out of control. Because when you know something clearly, because you've repeated that pattern over and over again, you've visited the same people, you've had the same conversation, you've thought the same thought, you've said the same thing, it's produced the same outcome. You went to the same restaurant, you talked with the same person, you made the same order, you ate the same food. That's known. Now, this gives you control because you know what to expect. The greatest fear for a traumatized culture is the unknown, and with it being out of control. Why? Well, When you've been traumatized, usually in infancy, in a dependent state, or in a relationship, romantic or otherwise, in a dependent state, and things have gone badly, and you've depended on someone, and they've let you down, they've betrayed you, they've abused their power, as all parents do at times, as all governments do at times, as all people in a vertical power dynamic do at times. They abuse their power. When you felt helpless and traumatized and betrayed and alone and out of control and in pain, at a certain threshold of that trauma, you as a child, as an adolescent, as an adult, have said to yourself, I will never feel this way again. I never want to feel this way again. No matter what, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to go through this again. And the only way to guarantee that you will not experience trauma, that you will not be betrayed in a helpless state, is to take a lot of control. To understand the pattern of the betrayal, the abuse, etc., and to control yourself and other people and reality in such a way that it's hard for that pattern to occur again. Now, the only way that you can take control is to stay in familiar terrain. If you're in unfamiliar terrain, you are not in control. It's that simple. The more unfamiliar the terrain, the less control you will feel. You know, if we snap your fingers like this and you're in a distant planet light years away, and you don't know what's edible, you don't know what you can breathe, you don't know if you're going to die, and you don't know how to get home. That's called trauma. That's called overwhelm. Now, it's equally true, and this is why it is traumatized cultures that have as their greatest fear the unknown. It's equally true that within the unknown are your greatest dreams, are miraculous and beautiful experiences that are beyond your ability to imagine. You can't imagine what it's like out there. And that's also in the unknown. The unknown is neutral. Things can get amazingly good or amazingly bad, but if they're deeply in unknown terrain, you will be surprised. You will be out of control. You will be in an innocent state, and that bell in your body of trauma and abuse going ding, 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 ding. This is what it was like when you were 3 years old and mom forgot that you were on the table and knocked you onto the floor or left you in that hot car. It felt terrible. Went on and on. Nobody was paying attention. I never want to be out of control again. And so we cling to our beliefs as a way of maintaining normalcy, certainty, familiarity, control over a known reality that we have figured out. And we don't want to leave that particular loop that we're on. And that's what an identity is, a cultural identity. Why do cultures have so much hostility for people who are completely different than they are? Why do so many cultures persecute their minorities viciously? What is the hatred, the fear that somebody who's different represents? It represents change. It represents the unknown. And it reminds me that I'm out of control, that there are people who are different, and I don't like it. Because my safety, what I'm pegging my safety on, is knowing everything and being in control. And so once we form our core beliefs, traumatized cultures, which we are, and their members cling to those beliefs. They cling to their group identity, to their personal identity, and they actively resist all data that counters the identity. Now, it's important to understand that the fear of the unknown is the primary fear. You can look at people going on in an endless chronic loop of depression, of misery, of mediocrity, of poverty. You could say, why don't you change your identity? Change your pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, and your life will not be miserable. It will go up. Yes, but it will also change. And in doing so, it will expose me to the unknown. And in doing so, it will expose me to my worst fears. It will lead me to feel out of control. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's next. Give me that old mediocrity. Because familiarity comes from the word family. And families, statistically speaking, are where our greatest abuse occurs. If you look at whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic violence, humiliation, shame, the vast majority of traumatic events that happen to children come from close family members and close family friends. Strangers are a walk in the park, statistically speaking, compared to one's family. But the family is also familiar. You've grown up in that pattern. You know what happens around drunkenness because it's the same pattern. So as painful as it is familiar. It is a loop. And so there's a cling to that pattern. Now, what we do with our beliefs as we cling to certainty is we look for evidence to support them. Now, one of the reasons we do this is the fear of insanity. Now, insanity is being faced with a belief of I'm a rich person and looking in the bank and being bankrupt and having creditors, and the belief I'm a rich person and bankrupt and creditors. That's insane, right? The reality is not matching. Now, because we cling to the belief as our identity, if at all possible, we start working to sculpt the reality that affirms our belief. So we start gathering evidence. And this is not hard to do because the brain only registers 50% of sensory data. So our eyes, our ears, our nose picks up 100% of the data, but then we take it through a filtering process called the default mode network of the brain, and we reduce that 100% of data down to 50% or less, depending on how tight our focus is. And what we tend to focus on, because remember in those beliefs, life is good, there's evidence for that. Life is bad. There's evidence for that. I'm a kind person. There's evidence for that. I'm a jerk. There's evidence for that too. But when we've picked core beliefs, the evidence and the things that we focus on in our effort to avoid insanity, because when we're insane, we're out of control. You know, saying there's no cars on the road and then driving out and hitting a bunch of cars that were actually on the road is insane. You're not in control. You're in delusion. So we want to be sane. And the way that we manufacture a lot of our sanity is by selectively picking the things that prove what? That we're right. We all want to be right. Why? so that we can continue to hold on to our beliefs. Why? So that we still know who we are. Why? So that we don't have to face the unknown. And so we're always doing that. If I believe I'm a positive person, then I look at my compliment to this person and the smile here and this, that, and I just don't look at the feelings that are feeling lonely or depressed, because that's kind of muddying the water, that's making things too complex. And we try and keep things simple because the brain is not capable of experiencing and digesting reality in its full complexity. There are billions upon billions upon billions of subatomic particles, all moving in all kinds of manner. And some of those movements correlate with our beliefs, and some of them, just cut right through the beliefs. They're complete opposition to our beliefs. But we couldn't even, it would take us a year to describe the movement of subatomic particles in a single finger for a single minute. It would take a year to articulate that, because at the subatomic level and the atomic level and the molecular level, there's so much going on. And so we look for these very simple beliefs, these simple models, because that's what these are. They're not real. Beliefs are not real. They're a way to relate and filter reality in a way that seems real, because we see the things that validate our belief, and we gather the evidence, and then we act accordingly and tend to reinforce, make choices, right? We make choices that confirm our belief. We have a strong bias. Now, the person over here that has the different belief is gathering evidence, the evidence that we're ignoring, to support their belief. And they're acting accordingly, and that's strengthening their belief. So we're looking to solidify a sane identity by tuning out. This is why we get so angry when people challenge our identity via challenging our core beliefs. The United States military and intelligence agencies have violated all kinds of treaties with Russia. But if we believe that Russia is the bad country, then we will be furious when we are presented with all the data that shows that in many areas, Russia keeps more of its military agreements than the US does. How are we the good guys, right? I thought we were the good guys. And I can't deal with the complexity of we're good sometimes, we're bad sometimes, we're crazy some other times, we're hypocrites at other times. I can't deal with that. It's too complicated. I need something simple and solid. And thankfully, for the simple, solid perspective, we are able to tune out the vast majority of data and look specifically at those bits of data that confirm what we already know, because we've already decided. And so we've formed a habit of gathering that kind of data. Now, because the fear of the unknown is so great, and the way that we cling to our beliefs is so strong, it becomes very important to understand what our core beliefs are. Now, within each one of us, there are certain moments in life where we feel and believe that we are bad, that we are unlovable, that we don't deserve, that our life is going to be hell, that will never amount to something, etc., etc. And so that is one belief, one structure. And over here, we believe that we're basically good people, and we're worthy, and we deserve, and we need to get paid for our hard work and all that. And we have these two polarities: the belief that we are lovable and good, and the belief that we are bad and deserve to be punished. Now, these structures are in tension with one another. Both are trying to gather data, and it's confusing. And so we're looking for it to consolidate, to avoid confusion, to avoid the fear of the unknown, to avoid the fear of chaos, to avoid being out of control, to know what to expect. We're trying to find what's the real thing, the one thing that we can believe, that we can depend on. And whatever we lean on, we gather evidence to support that. And so there is a wound, there is a pain in us of unlovability, of shame, of fear, of terror, of trauma. And the belief that I deserve that, because all children who are abused in some way, who are hurt in some way, we all believed as children that at some level it was because we were bad, because God was angry at us. Whole cultures throughout history have believed that when an earthquake happens or this happens, it's because they're bad. When a parent abuses their child, whatever, it's because they're ugly, they deserve it. That's the belief of the self-centered child, because the self-centered child, it's all about them. So we have these different beliefs in us. As we move into the one belief, in order to feel safe and in order to secure our identity, we will gather evidence. If we go into this other area, we will do the same thing. And so there is a tension of belief. And wherever we put our attention, our energy, that part tends to get stronger and stronger and stronger until it consumes us, or until it gets so painful that we flip and turn to the other side and start building that identity, that belief. So hopefully this is useful in understanding this dynamic tension that's within each conscious mind of an individual, of a family, of a culture, and of a species. Thank you. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.